Hi, everybody. It's so great to see everybody today. We're so excited you could join us. As you can see on the screen, there's an opening poll. So we want to see who's in the room today. So as everybody's getting logged in, if you could please answer the poll. And the question is, what is your role in the tribal organization? If you just click that, it will answer the poll. Thank you. Just going to give everybody some time to get settled. I see a few answers coming in. If you can't see the poll, please let us know in the chat box so we can try to support you. Thank you, April. Again, as you all are logging in, if you can just click on the poll and answer the poll, that would be great. We're just trying to figure out who's in the room today. And I see several of you are doing it in the chat box. So I'm sorry if the poll's not launching for you. I see we do have a couple of answers on the poll itself, but the chat box works fine too. Thank you all. Thank you. We'll go ahead and look at the poll results really quick. Awesome, thank you so much. So it looks like we have about 30% CCDF administrator or co-administrator, about 46 tribal fiscal staff, and about 24% other. And again, I do see you all are dropping those answers in the chat box. Thank you so much. And I just want to mention that you are at the use of CCDF funds today, session today, and feel free to use the chat box as you all are doing, and you are also free to introduce yourself there. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Rachel. Thank you all.
Thank you, Melissa, for kicking us off. As Melissa said, my name is Rachel McKinnon. I am a senior child care policy specialist in the Office of Child Care. And I want to thank you all for joining us today during this webinar. So we have created this three-part webinar series to give more information about CCDF tribal fiscal management. And we are doing this in response to the large number of requests that we've received for additional training around CCDF fiscal management and also the ACF 696T report. We know that CCDF has a very complicated funding structure, and that lends itself to a very complicated spending report form. So we want to make sure that we're giving you all as many resources as we can. So like I said, this is the first in a series of 3 that will address various fiscal management pieces and end in a specific training for the ACF 696T financial report. So today it'll be use of funds, where we talk about the spending requirements, different activities and how they fit the different categories of spending, and just this sort of overview of the CCDF funds. On November 7th, let me start first. On October 6th, we'll have another webinar on a budgeting tool. So this is a tool that can help you sort of plan ahead of how you want to use your funds to support children and families while also meeting the CCDF spending requirements. And then on November 7th, we'll have our training on accessing, completing, and submitting the ACF 696 financial report. And then once these 3 webinars are done, we will have some open office hours where folks, as they're getting started on their ACF 696T reports, they can come with specific questions about how to fill out different pieces, or just have a chance to touch base as you're working on those forms. And then also one of the things we're offering during this webinar series is a chance to sign up for some one-on-one meetings with OGM staff. So even though we're having these webinars that have, breakout rooms and time for discussion, and also the office hours, some folks can really benefit from some one-on-one time with their grants management specialist. And so we will provide a form that you can use to request a meeting. It won't have scheduling information in that form, but it's a way for us to then reach back out to you and connect you with your grants management specialist and set up a one-on-one meeting. I did want to mention that each of these webinars are going to be recorded. You'll get a link to the recording if you're registered for this meeting, but we'll also be putting these recordings on the Tribal Childcare Capacity Building Center website. So that way they'll be available to you, as you're getting ready to fill out your 696T report, and even maybe next year as you're doing planning and maybe getting ready for your next report. So we want this to be a resource that's available for folks for the long term. Also, in terms of registration, if you're registered for this webinar, welcome, great, you made it. But that also means that you're registered for each of the 3 webinars. So we are excited to see you next month and the following month. But if there's anyone who didn't register in time for this webinar, it is not a problem. The registration page will remain open until that 3rd webinar. And so people can continue to register for the webinars. And like I said, they will always be able to access the recordings once we put them on the website, whether they attended or registered for the meetings to begin with. So that being said, thank you again for being here. And I will hand it over to my colleague, Patty Bollinger. She has good and capable hands to kick off the actual good content of this webinar. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, as Rachel mentioned, we are excited to have you all here. We did present a similar session at our national conference this past spring in Minnesota. We had great response to it, but we also know that we had a lot of program staff there and not necessarily always fiscal staff. So it was really exciting for me to look at the sign-in and see how many fiscal staff are on the call today. We're excited to have you here with us and excited to talk about the use of CCDF funds. I want to encourage you to ask questions. You are always more than welcome to come off mute, or you can put a question in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. As Rachel mentioned, we will have breakout rooms at the end of today's session. So that's another great opportunity to dialogue with the Office of Child Care and ask questions. So our agenda today, we're going to do a welcome and introductions. We're going to cover our objectives. We're going to do some foundational work talking about the coding of expenses, and then get into more details about the use of CCDF funds. We want to talk about building bridges. And then we'll have and we also want to talk about the opportunity Rachel mentioned to sign up for office hours, and that's where that will happen. And then we're going to have breakout rooms at the end. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to introduce the team that helped develop this webinar today. Joey Bishop, who is a regional program specialist in Region 6 out of Dallas. Again, I'm Patty Bollinger, a regional program specialist out of Dallas, Region 6. We have Sarah English, who is also a regional program specialist. She works out of our Denver office, which is Region 8. And we have Dina Evans, who's a regional program specialist out of our Chicago regional office, which is Region 5. Also not pictured because I think we initially thought she wasn't going to be able to join us today is Tammy Charles. She is on the line. She helped us develop this webinar, and she is also a program specialist out of Dallas, Region 6. We also have our amazing Tribal Childcare Capacity Building Center technical assistance partners who helped us. We have Melissa Madrid, who you met right away, and we also have Reina Reynoso, who's also been an essential part of our team. So as Melissa mentioned at the beginning, we also are excited to see who's on the call. So if you haven't had an opportunity to introduce yourself, please do so in the chat. And now we can go ahead and go to the next slide. just a little bit about our objectives today, and you might have realized these looking at our agenda. The first is really to increase awareness about the importance of the accurate and consistent coding of expenses in the fiscal management cycle. It's also to enhance program and fiscal staff understanding of and communication about CCDF requirements and about the coding of expenditures. And we also want to build your knowledge on the use of CCDF funds and the spending requirements that accompany those. We're going to talk about some general cost principles, and we're going to really go through 5 CCDF cost categories. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So with that, we'll jump right into coding of expenses. Let's go to the next slide. We want to lay a little bit of a foundation and talk about the fiscal management system, which of course, many of you are probably really familiar with this if you're from a fiscal office. But good fiscal management is one of the keys to having a successful program. It includes having reliable and accurate accounting systems and processes when you're dispersing CCDF funds. There are 4 important components in that system. Of course, your CCDF grant, the Child Care and Development Fund grant, your budget, record keeping and reporting, and program integrity and accountability. And within that system, it's really important that leadership, program, and fiscal staff meet regularly to discuss and monitor budgets, cost allocation plans, allowable expenditures, and drawdowns in preparation of reports and fiscal audits. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So the fiscal management cycle really occurs in 4 general phases, right? You have budgeting, spending, accounting, and reporting and auditing. So budgeting is where you're planning, developing, adopting, and executing your CCDF budget. That budget's a plan of operations for a specified period expressed in financial terms. We know that typically CCDF grants have 3-year spending periods, but that has changed with the opportunities for waivers to extend obligation liquidation periods. And we also know that sometimes budgeting occurs in CDF with the anticipation of a specific grant award, but we also know we're never quite 100% sure of our budget until that grant award is issued. So, because of 2 things. One, we're never quite sure what Congress might do in terms of our overall allocations, and you also aren't 100% sure of your specific CCDF allocation until those child counts are submitted on that triennial basis. So what we know is that creating budgets and revising those budgets is an ongoing effort with your CCDF grant. So the Office of Child Care, in collaboration with TCBC, has developed a budget tool to assist lead agencies when developing budgets. And as Rachel mentioned, that is going to be featured on our next upcoming webinar on financial planning and the CCDF budgeting tool. So again, we want to encourage you to come back in October to learn more about that tool. Let's go ahead and go to the next phase of the fiscal management cycle, which of course is spending. Someone mentioned earlier today, isn't that the fun phase, right? That's when you get to be creative and spend your dollars. And of course, that's what today's webinar is focused on, the spending of your CCDF funds. We're going to provide information about the allowable uses of CCDF funds, CCDF spending requirements, and maybe we'll even give you some new ideas on how to spend your CCDF dollars to best meet the needs of the children, families, and child care providers in your community. Next slide, please. I mentioned record keeping or accounting. So that's, of course, the process where you're assembling, analyzing, classifying, and recording all your financial data. Those records consist of things like source documents, journals, ledgers, records, and budget-related transactions. Of course, accurate record keeping facilitates the accurate completion of your 696T financial report, and it ensures an easier audit process. Next slide, please. And that last phase is reporting and auditing. So lead agencies prepare reports from your records and provide the Office of Child Care and ultimately data that goes to Congress and to the public with information concerning your financial operations and the relation of such operations to the budget. So in order to properly complete your 696T report, you must ensure that you've been keeping track of all of your records and that a good system is in place to manage your data or your files. Auditing occurs when there's an examination and verification of those accounting records and reports to determine whether transactions are recorded properly and reflected properly in the accounting records, and that all your reports are in compliance with CCDF requirements. It's also determining whether there's proper oversight and handling of money and property, and just overall compliance with fiscal policies and procedures. So our third webinar in our series, as Rachel mentioned, is on financial reporting. So again, here's a plug for November. We hope to see all of you back to talk in more detail about the reporting phase of your fiscal management cycle. So why is it important to talk about the fiscal management cycle right now? In today's webinar, we are going to discuss how the CCDF program identifies 5 allowable cost categories that have specific spending requirements. It's important to note that identifying those categories early in the cycle assists with coordination and communication among tribal leadership, program administrators, and financial managers. For CCDF purposes, it's important that all CCDF expenditures are identified as falling into one of those 5 categories. And that's the simplest way to think about the coding of expenditures and why it's so important. Those same cost categories, if they're identified early on with your budget, then in your record keeping, and then you report on those same 5 cost categories in your 696T report. So that's why that's so important to think about coding of expenditures early. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So expense coding is an important part of financial management and accounting. It involves, what is that, right? It involves categorizing and assigning codes to the various expenses that are incurred. It ensures that every expense is accurately recorded, classified, and allocated to the appropriate cost account. That means that every step of that fiscal management cycle, all the individuals involved in each phase understand that the documents reflect accurate expense codes. So we're going to briefly talk about the concept of it, its significance, and some best practices in order to implement an efficient expense coding system. So expense coding is a systematic method of organizing and tracking financial transaction. It usually uses alphanumeric codes to categorize expenses based on their nature, their purpose, the relevance. Codes tend to vary greatly from one lead agency to another, but they typically include characters that identify at a minimum the account that expenditure should come from and the cost type. They can also include things like the division responsible for the expense or even a specific project under the account. Each expense code would be unique and helps to distinguish one type of expense from another. So the primary objective of expense coding is to enhance financial visibility and control, enabling lead agencies to make informed decisions, monitor their spending patterns, and identify cost-saving opportunities. So a well-structured expense coding system is really a foundation for sound financial management and can really streamline accounting processes. So consistent and accurate expense coding offers several benefits. Number 1, enhanced financial reporting, right? That coding ensures that financial reports accurately depict the lead agency expenditures. That also helps your leadership and stakeholders gain a real clear understanding of the CCDF program and requirements. It allows for lead agencies to allocate costs to specific projects or to departments, so it leads to more reliable cost allocation. It leads to accurate budgets and forecasting, because with well-defined codes, lead agencies can create more accurate budgets. Understanding past spending patterns and projecting future expenses becomes more streamlined, facilitating better planning. And finally, it's improved compliance and auditing. A really robust expense coding system promotes compliance with CCDF and financial regulations and auditing standards. So accurate and transparent coding ensures that financial records are reliable, reducing the risk of fiscal mismanagement and potential penalties. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So again, it's really important to develop that coding system early on in your fiscal cycle. Some best practices around expense coding: standardization, ensuring that expense codes are uniform throughout your organization. That enhances consistency, simplifies reporting, and avoids confusion. That they're clear and descriptive. Using descriptive labels for each expense code can make it easy to identify the purpose and nature of the expense. This reduces the likelihood of errors in coding and streamlines that data entry. Investing in automation in accounting software can often be of great assistance because it can offer automated expense coding features, and it then can reduce manual errors and save time and improve accuracy. Expense coding should evolve with your program. It's important to regularly review and update the coding structure to accommodate new expenses, changes in program priorities, or new projects. It's also important that training occurs for both program and fiscal staff involved in expense coding to ensure that everyone understands the coding system and its importance. It's important to encourage open communication to address any questions or challenges related to expense coding. And finally, it's important for data security. Implementing security measures to protect sensitive financial information and restrict access to authorized personnel is very important when you think about your expenses. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So with that foundation, thinking about how we code our expenses, I want to talk a little bit about CCDF funds. As a reminder, CCDF funding is comprised of two main funding sources. You have your discretionary funds, which includes your base amount, and those are provided under the Child Care and Development Block Grant Act. You also have tribal mandatory funds. Those are funds that are provided under the Section 418A4 of the Social Security Act. Those both have a per child amount, are based on a per child amount, pardon me, and your discretionary funds also have that base amount, which we're going to talk more about. And that is what encompasses your total CCDF allocation. As you're aware, during the COVID-19 pandemic, you also received additional funding to support children, families, and the child care workforce. These included funds such as CARES, CRSA, the RBAC stabilization, RBAC supplemental funds. So you do have a number of additional funds that might be available to you because of the fiscal waiver opportunities that extended obligation liquidation periods. But today's focus is primarily on traditional CCDF funds. I also wanted to mention that some tribal lead agencies impacted by Hurricanes Fiona and Ian also likely have some additional disaster relief funding. But again, we are going to focus primarily on traditional CCDF funding today. If you have specific questions related to relief funding requirements, please reach out to your Office of Child Care Regional Office or to the TCBC team with any questions. Let's go to the next slide. What we're all here to talk about, spending our CCDF dollars, the use of funds. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This slide provides an overview of the CCDF allowable cost categories for tribal lead agencies. These categories also have some spending requirements attached to them that can vary based on the allocation size. So tribal lead agencies that have consolidated their CCDF programs into an approved Public Law 102477 plan are also subject to these cost categories and to spending requirements. We're going to go into more details on each of these, but this is just a brief overview of those 5 cost categories. You have direct services, which is expenditures for child care services. That's direct care for children for eligible children with eligible providers. We have administrative costs, which also includes your indirect cost determined by your indirect cost rate. Non-direct services, which are really an interesting category that we will talk about. And those are costs which are specifically identified as not being administrative costs. We have your quality improvement activities. And it's important to know that tribal lead agencies must use a minimum amount of funds to improve the quality and availability of childcare. And finally, tribal lead agencies can use CCDF funds for construction and/or major renovation. It's important to note that those can only be used for construction or major renovation with prior ACF approval. And again, we'll get into more details later on. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Before we start talking about each of those individually, I do want to share specifically what the CCDF final rule says in terms of restrictions on the use of funds. Specific activities prohibited under CCDF, and go ahead and Hannah, go ahead and click through and bring those all up. Thank you. The first is tuition. So funds cannot be expended for students enrolled in grades 1 through 12 for any service provided to such students during a regular school day, any service for which students receive academic credit towards graduation, or any instructional services that supplant or duplicate the academic program of a public or a private school. The second area that's restricted in terms of the use of funds is in regard to sectarian purposes and activities. So there is a caveat here. Funds that are provided under grants or contracts for direct services to providers may not be expended for any sectarian purpose or activity, including sectarian worship or instruction. The reason for that is that grants or contracts for providers are considered assistance to the provider. Hold on to that thought. Certificates are considered assistance to parents. That is not a grant or a contract. So funds provided through childcare certificates can be expended for sectarian purpose or activities, including sectarian worship or instruction, when provided as a part of childcare services. Finally, CCDF funds cannot be used as a non-federal share for other federal programs unless they're explicitly authorized by statute. So those are our main 3 areas of restrictions on the use of funds. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And when considering the use of CCDF funds, it's important to consider some commonly accepted general cost principles. Those being a cost would be reasonable, allocable, consistently treated, and allowable. So a cost is considered reasonable if the nature of the goods or services and the price paid for the goods and services reflects the action that a prudent person would have taken, given the prevailing circumstances at the time the decision to incur the cost was made. Let's give an example. We know that there are many CCDF programs that have purchased vehicles for use by their CCDF program. We always like to say, you don't necessarily need to buy the Porsche. That is not necessarily reasonable in cost. Would a prudent person, the average person on the street, think that that was a reasonable cost? And likely the answer would be no. So it'd be more important to look at that Ford or that Honda versus a Porsche. So reasonable costs would need to be considered reasonable. A cost should be allocable. That means it's allocable to a particular award if the services involved can be directly charged to the award based on the time, on the benefit provided. So to determine if it's allocable, you should ask the following types of questions. Does it benefit the award or the funding sources? Can it be distributed to all benefited funding sources using reasonable methods? And does the basis for allocating the cost represent a reasonable estimation of the benefit provided to the award objectives? So can you directly charge it to CCDF? Or should it be cost shared among programs is a great question to ask when you consider allocable. A cost is consistently treated if all costs incurred for the same purpose and in like circumstances may be treated uniformly. So consistent costs, that the cost for another program, it would be the same as for CCDF. Let's go back to our vehicle. You're buying that Ford truck to carry supplies, to do monitoring visits and inspections. Is the dealer charging one program twice the price that another program would receive, right? Consistently treated. A cost is allowable if it's permitted as a cost within the general federal regulations and in the terms of the specific award, which is CCDF, and or your own internal policies and procedures. So again, is it allowable under CCDF for specific purposes to purchase a vehicle? It is, within certain requirements. So that would be allowable. But for example, does your lead agency have restrictions on the use of purchase of a vehicle? If so, OCC, would respect that that is the policy that would not allow you to buy that. So again, is it allowable? And those are just 4 generally accepted cost principles to consider when you think about costs. Okay. As we jump in, let's go to the next slide. And I want to just give a little reminder. This is a reminder slide that CCDF requirements do vary based on the size of the allocation that you've received. Those allocation sizes are actually determined by the size of your federal fiscal year 2016 award. No matter what your award level is for this current fiscal year, your allocation size is determined by what you received in FY 2016. So we've got a QR code on the screen if you're not sure. This slide demonstrates the allocation size designations. If in fiscal year 2016 you received less than $250,000, that is considered a small allocation. A medium allocation would be between $250,000 up to $1 million. And a large allocation is more than $1 million. So if you are a tribal lead agency that received funding for the first time after 2016, your allocation size is determined by your first annual award amount. So again, if you are not sure of your allocation size, go ahead and use that QR code, or I think we've got the link. I think we're going to put the link in the chat for you to be able to access that information, because it will definitely be helpful to you as we go through requirements. All right. So I mentioned that part of the discretionary funds that you receive is considered a base amount. Currently, the base amount is $30,000 for each tribal lead agency. If you're a member of a consortium, then you receive a full base amount if you have a child count of 50 children or above. If you have a child count of less than 50 children, you receive a base amount based on the proportion of children you have to 50. So you would receive a lesser base amount, but it would be adjusted based on your child count. So what's important to know about the discretionary base amount is that it provides an important source of funds that can be used for any of those 5 cost categories, as long as it's consistent with the purpose and requirements of CCDF. So these funds are the most flexible since they're not subject to various spending requirements that we're going to be talking about today. It can provide you with an opportunity to develop your infrastructure and capacity to operate a child care program. It can be used for administrative costs, for direct child care services to children, for non-direct services, for quality activities, or for pre-approved construction or major renovation projects. So it is your flexible funding. It's important to note that. Let's go ahead and go on the next slide. And let's talk about those 5 categories. The first is direct services. Again, direct services are child care services provided directly to eligible children by eligible child care providers. They're provided through 3 different mechanisms. One is through a certificate or a voucher, which again, we talked about is considered assistance to the parent. It can be provided through grants and contracts. Again, assistance to a provider. So that would be a contract with an agreement with a provider. Or it can be through tribally operated centers. In the case of a tribally operated center, direct service expenditures include CCDF dollars used to operate the center and provide services to CCDF eligible children. So that can include payments for wages and salaries and benefits for childcare staff and support staff. It can include facility costs, overall operational costs of the tribally operated center. Tribal lead agencies with small allocation sizes are not required to offer direct services. And this is where I'm going to ask for a little bit of engagement. You'll see a little reaction or react heart at the bottom of your screen. If you are a small allocation size, a program with a small allocation size, and you do not offer direct services, would you please give us a raise your hand? There are only a couple nationally, so I wanted to see if we had any on the call today. Okay. Oh, I see a hand up. Wonderful. Okay, we've got one. And so they are not, a tribe with a small allocation is not required to offer direct services. And so that's one of those areas of flexibility that you have. You can choose to do so based on the needs of your families and community, but you do not have to. Tribal lead agencies that receive medium and large allocations are required to spend a substantial percentage of their discretionary funds, and again, not including the base amount, on direct services. So direct services, that is our first category. All right, let's talk about administrative costs, our second cost category. Examples of administrative costs include, but are not limited to, all of these activities that are on your screen. Without having to go through all of them, I want to just point out some. Planning, developing, and designing the CCDF program, preparing your application and plan, developing agreements, overall monitoring of program activities. That does not include monitoring of providers, but that's overall monitoring of the Pro CCDF program itself. Preparing reports, maintaining files, coordinating the provision of services with other federal, state, and local childcare, early childhood development programs, and before and after school programs. Working through audit and monitoring findings, evaluating results, managing or supervising people with responsibilities for any of these activities. Those are all considered administrative costs. And it's important to note that indirect costs, as determined by an indirect cost agreement, are an allowable expense. However, regardless of your negotiated indirect cost rate, administrative costs cannot exceed the 15% administrative cost limit that tribal lead agencies have. Now, remember, you do have that 15% max from on administrative costs. However, you do have that flexible funding, that base amount, which could also be used for administrative costs in addition to this 15% limit. All right, let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about our next cost category, which is non-direct services. So we know the final rule provides examples of administrative costs. The final rule also includes a list of activities that Congress specifically said in a report that accompanied the 2016 final rule, that these are activities that should not be counted towards the administrative limit. And so this is one of those areas that's really important for both program and fiscal staff to understand and communicate about, because many of these are often considered administrative costs by other federal programs. We call these non-direct services. So under the CCDF final rule, non-direct services are all of these activities that are listed on your screen, really quickly going through them and highlighting some. The establishment and maintenance of computerized childcare information systems. We know how important data collection is. I mentioned the importance of automated systems and thinking about the coding of expenses. Those type of expenses do not fall under that administrative cost cap. Establishing and operating a certificate program. Your eligibility determination and redetermination efforts often are considered administrative by other federal programs. Under CCDF, it is considered a non-direct service. It should be coded as such. It should be tracked as such and reported as such. It's important to remember, what does that mean? Is that if you have a person who 100% of their time is doing eligibility determination, they could be 100% non-direct. If a portion of their time is considered eligibility determination, that portion of their time could be a non-direct versus an administrative cost or another cost category, depending on the other activities that that person performs. So preparation and participation in judicial hearings, childcare placements, this one on recruitment, licensing, inspection of childcare providers. We're going to talk in just a minute about quality activities, and you'll see that the inspection and review of childcare placements is often considered a quality activity. So you might question, how is it both, right? This was congressional intent that it's not considered administrative costs. If you have an activity such as the monitoring and inspection of childcare providers that could be either considered a quality activity or a non-direct, the Office of Child Care would encourage you to consider that a quality activity. And we'll talk in a minute about spending requirements around quality and why that can be helpful to you. But it's important to acknowledge it can be in either cost category. Okay, so training for lead agency or subrecipient staff on billing and claims processes, review and supervision of childcare placements, and activities associated with payment rate setting. Finally, training for childcare staff. So again, some of these expenditures could be considered administrative costs under other federal programs, but not necessarily for CCDF. So you've got some additional flexibility that way when you think about administrative cost limitations. It's also important to remember that while we often hear the term non-direct or direct in financial circles, Non-direct is not necessarily the same under CCDF as it is under many other federal programs. It's also not the same as indirect costs. We often see people get confused between indirect costs and non-direct. Indirect costs are those administrative costs that can't be easily allocated to a specific program, but those are considered administrative costs under CCDF. That is non-direct services. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide to talk about our fourth cost category, quality activities. So tribal CCDF lead agencies are required to spend a percentage of your total CCDF expenditures on quality improvement activities. We often refer to that as your quality set aside. It is that you have a 9% minimum requirement, just 9% of your per child amount. Remember, it doesn't apply to your base amount that has to be spent on quality activities. You'll see a large number of items defined in the final rule as quality and availability type of activities. And those are demonstrated here. Everything from supporting training, professional development, and the education of the workforce, working on early learning and development guidelines, consideration and planning and developing a tiered quality rating and improvement system, improving the supply of quality of childcare programs, supporting childcare resource and referral activities, compliance with inspection, monitoring, training, and health and safety requirements. And again, this might be an area of overlap with non-direct. Evaluating, assessing the quality and effectiveness of childcare programs, supporting childcare providers in pursuit of accreditation, supporting the adoption of high quality program standards. And this is the key one, carrying out other activities to improve the quality of childcare services. We love that item because it gives you that flexibility to determine what are the needs around quality improvement and supply building in your community. So we recognize that particularly the significant efforts that tribal CCDF programs have made in supporting, for example, language and cultural activities. And those activities are encouraged and definitely fall under the quality cost category. So again, lots of flexibility. While there is that list of kind of defined activities, that last one is other activities. And so we want to make sure that you have the ability to identify the needs of the providers and the families in your community. Let's go ahead and go to our last thing about quality. So all tribal CCDF lead agencies are required to spend that 9% on your total CCDF expenditures on quality improvement activities. That's increased over time. And you can see that on this slide, it shows that in 2020, it was 8%. Beginning in 2022 and ongoing, it was 9%. And that applies to tribes with all allocation sizes. So those are a reminder, those are applied to total funds expended, similar to the administrative max, but this is a minimum rather than your total funds allocated. So it's an important reminder for us that, again, that you properly code your expenditures so that you're able to track them and meet that minimum spending requirement. Quality expenditures, that minimum, similar to the administrative maximum, are considered cumulatively over that liquidation period of each fiscal year's grant. So as you're submitting those 696T reports, and I know we'll talk about this in webinar 3, it's not until you issue that final report that we're looking at that quality minimum and that administrative max. And even though you look at those grant years, like I mentioned, and you're thinking, wow, who's got 2020 funds left? Remember, we still have a number of programs that have fiscal waivers for extended obligation and liquidation periods. One more. Okay. So the next slide shows the infant toddler quality set aside. We know that we have the quality set aside, that's the minimum 9% that applies to all tribal CCDF programs of all allocation sizes. So the infant toddler quality set aside applies only to those tribal lead agencies with medium and large allocation sizes. So those programs have an additional requirement when it comes to quality. They have to spend at least 3% of their total expenditures on infant toddler quality activities. And as similar to the 9% quality requirement, it's to those funds expended, not to the total of funds available. And so that brings us to our fifth cost category. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Joey Bishop.
Hey everyone, so we're going to have a few slides here to go over construction, even though this could be a webinar in and of its own. We're going to hit the highlights. The first thing is the CCDF Act permits tribal lead agencies, 477 or direct funded tribes to use CCDF for construction or major renovation of childcare facilities. So it's important that you know that all CCDF funds can be set aside for that, even supplemental funds, but it will draw from your existing CCDF allocation. So when you're looking at and there's a lot of people outside of CCDF with tribal lead agencies that will look and go, oh, this is an additional funding source, but it's really not. So you're actually using your existing funds to set aside for construction. And when you do that, don't feel like you're going a direction and you can't undo it. Because if you do set aside funds for a year or two, and you're deciding to go the construction route, but it doesn't work, there is a repurpose letter to where you can go, well, we were going to build, but for whatever reason, we decided not to. So you can undo anything that you do. So that is not an issue at all. On the construction and major renovation flexibilities, construction is basically just a new facility, and it requires that you do a full application. And we'll talk a little more about the applications here in just a little bit. But when you move to renovations, here's where things change. With the updates, with the definition of major renovation in the new CCDF regulations, which it became effective April 30th, 2024, and it's outlined in the final rule, major renovations were previously defined based solely on the activities and the change to the facility. The new definition now, it employs a cost-based approach with specific thresholds for childcare centers and family childcare homes. So under the old definition, any renovation that altered the structure, function, or purpose of that facility was classified as a major renovation. It didn't matter how much it cost. It just required a submission and approval of that application. However, the new definition specifies that renovations costing less than $350,000 in federal CCDF funds for centers and $50,000 for family childcare homes are considered minor renovation, and they do not require an application. So it's important to note a caveat to that is regarding the cost thresholds. And during all the consultations, feedback was given, and this is one of the areas where OCC acted on that. And with that, it was determined, a lot of tribes said, hey, in the rural area, things cost a lot. It's gone up exponentially in the rural area. And we have definitely seen that. So now, under the new definitions, it clarifies that if a cost of a renovation project exceeds specific thresholds of, say, $350,000 for a childcare center, but it doesn't alter the facility structure, function, or purpose, and instead it just enhances the health and safety or quality of the facility, it's still minor renovation. So in summary of all of that, basically, if you're doing a renovation and you're changing major things, major construction would be over $350,000. So on exceeding and $50,000 for a home. So renovations exceeding the thresholds that are considered minor renovation, once again, is the structures to like the foundation, roof, floor exterior, or load-bearing walls, or the expansion of the facility floor area, that's major. So if it anything that changes exponentially is going to be considered major. So, but like I say, the health and safety areas and quality, if it exceeds the 350, then it is minor. So with that being said, I always say get with your regional program specialist and walk through this. Here's what we're looking at doing. Here's what we want to do. We think it's minor renovation. Do you think it's major? Walk through that and go from there. So we'll go on to the next slide. And, I think, okay. And I think I caught that one a little bit earlier too. So, I think they were turned. So the next slide. All right, so in a construction application, we've kind of broke out a few things for you because what we have found is it's hard to get started, and it's kind of like if you're going to eat an elephant, you got to do it one bite at a time. And I always say bring plenty of friends. So when you look here, you got the CCDF administrator, you could have your architect, finance, and then there's other people that can be involved also. So when you divide all this out, there's 18 areas or more of the CCDF construction application. And when you divide it out, it's easily conquerable. So on the quick wins, these are so of the 18, these are several areas that you can just knock out really quick. And whenever you pull your team together, your architect, finance, and different people, you have a little bit of a basis here to where it's not definitive. I mean, like it could change within your tribe who does what, but definitely you can divide that workload out. Now, what I will tell you about doing a construction application is it is not a test for us. We're not going to score you and give you a 90, a 85, or 100. It is a matter of ensuring that you go through the process of each one of the 18 and you consider how that's going to impact your tribe. We want you to have those thoughts because most generally no one is on the major construction bandwagon where it's your 18th facility that you've built. So all of these are set up to be thought-provoking, to ensure that you give consideration to each and every one of those. And what I will tell you is within Region 6, we have tribes that they may cover 3 or 4 of these areas and then email us and say, hey, how are the answers to these questions? Do they look good? And I always highlight them, send them back and say, perfect, leave it alone. Let's move on to the next ones. So back to eating that elephant, if you'll just take the time and work with your regional program specialist, you can knock these out just systematically. And you're going to raise your head one day and this whole application is going to be done and you're going to go, okay, I'm ready to submit. And so for my 3 slides, that's all we got, but I hope I've motivated you. If you're sitting on an application, if you're considering an application, your first partner in all of this is your assigned regional program specialist. And I guarantee you, they ought to be your cheerleader, motivator, and 3 other things, because we wear many different hats and they'll be glad to help you. And if not, just call me and I'll call and talk to them. So there we go. That's construction in a nutshell. Next.
Thank you, Joey. We're going to go ahead and launch a poll and you'll see multiple polls on your screen. And so the questions are laid out. So the first question is, what is the cost category for contracts to provide childcare for infants? And then you have direct services, administrative costs, non-direct service, quality activity, construction or major renovation, or it's unallowable under CCDF. So if you could just go ahead and answer the poll. And then what you'll do is you'll keep scrolling down on this screen and there's more polls on there. And then when we're done with the polls, Patty's going to give us all the right answers. So don't worry if you're hesitant to answer, because Patty's going to give us all of the good stuff afterwards. So again, if you could just scroll down to the next one, there's going to be a total of 6 questions that you'll want to answer. And I see a lot of you are using the polls, so thank you so much. Appreciate that. And I'll go to question number 2, which is, What is the cost category for providing resource and referral activities? Again, I can see a lot of you doing the poll, answering the poll. 3 is what is the cost category for building a storm shelter? That's a really good one. What is the cost category for culture or language specialists? Also a very good one. And I'm loving the answers here. I can see them popping up. The last one, number 5, is what is the cost category for fees at a private school? This one might be a trick question. Patty, you'll share the answers with us. And 6 is what is the cost category for an administrative assistant salary? Right. Once we see that the responses are slowing down, we'll go ahead and show the responses, and then Patty will take it over and give us all the answers. But we can still see there's a lot of votes coming in, so we'll continue to hold while we watch these numbers go up. This is really great. About half of you are participating right now in live real time. So about 48%, or well, hey, we hit 50% are participating. I love that. So again, scroll down on the screen where you see the poll launched and go ahead and answer the questions. All the way down till you get to question number 6.
I feel like we should have some Jeopardy music playing next time.
Yeah, that was fun when we were in person for sure. All right, I still see percentage growing of participation, so I'll give everybody a few more seconds to get their last votes in before we turn it over to Patty. Very nice. I'm loving all the participation. I just want to say thank you again for being with us and for participating, and all of the great items that are being put in the chat. I appreciate all of you. All right, I'm going to do the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to pass it over to Patty if we can share the results.
Thank you, Melissa. And I echo what you said. Thank you, everyone, for participating and for thinking through these different expenditures. So our first question, what is the cost category for contracts to provide childcare for infants? And we have 82% correctly answered direct services. Remember, well, and I say that, and I'm tricking myself. So you can have contracts for providing direct services for infants would be considered a direct service under our cost categories. You might have a contract for some type of quality activity with infants, and that could be a quality activity. But in this instance, we're looking at direct childcare. So that was kind of the hidden trick in there. It's to provide childcare. So again, you can definitely have contracts. Remember, under direct services, contracts and grants are one of our 3 mechanisms for providing direct services, and that is considered assistance to that provider. So great answers. Let's look at number 2, the cost category for providing resource and referral activities. So we have a close split there between non-direct and quality. And I want to say hooray for everyone who answered both non-direct and quality, because you will find resource and referral activities listed under both non-direct and quality. Now, I guess the follow-up question for you all is, where should we put that when we're tracking and recording it? It is an allowable expenditure under the CCDF final rule for both non-direct and quality, but where would we encourage you to report that? Under which of those cost categories? If you say non-direct, let's do this. Let's look at your reaction button. If you say non-direct, send me a wave, right? The little wave emoji. If you say it should be under quality, do a heart. Let's see what happens. If you think it should be reported as non-direct, we want the little hand raise or the waving hand emoji. If you think it should be quality, let's see a heart. Seeing some hearts. I saw a couple hands. Okay, So far, it's about half and half, and I guess a lot of people are abstaining. They don't want to pick. So again, it is listed under both non-direct services, which means it doesn't have to be considered administrative costs, and it's also listed under quality. Again, we would encourage you to record it and report it as quality, because you do have that minimum quality expenditure that you need to meet. So that's important to think about. So that's great. Well, we can all put our emojis down, or do I have questions? Anybody want to, if anybody has a question, do they want to come off mute? I'm stumping myself. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands. So let's go to the next one. And Melissa's right. These are a little tricky, and this is why that communication is so important. So what is the cost category for building a storm shelter? This is you're going to see a theme here. They're all a little nuanced. It looks like 69% of our respondents said it should be construction or major renovation. Some said it was unallowable. I also see 12% for quality, 5% of our respondents for non-direct, and 4% for direct service. So what I would recommend is that it needs to be considered either construction or major renovation if that storm shelter is being built as part of a construction or major renovation project, right, that has been pre-approved. However, we also know that there are a number of types of storm shelters that are smaller in scale and cost, right, that are kind of separate. For example, I know I'm familiar with a number of programs that you can purchase kind of a prefabricated storm shelter that comes in like 2 parts. You bring out, you dig a big hole, you put one half down, you put the other part on top, and you cover it up. If that's less than $350,000 and that's all you're doing, that could be considered a quality activity, right? So it could be either construction or major renovation if it's a part of a pre-approved construction or major renovation project, or it could be quality. Questions about that one? And Joey, because you're our construction guru on this call, do you have anything addition to add to that?
Patty, I want to add that even those who said unallowable could be right, that it does still have to be relatable to childcare. So I don't just get to go install one for my neighbor because they're great and they let my dog out or bring them back when they run away, but it still has to be of relation to the childcare program.
Absolutely. A great reminder, which is true for all of these expenditures. Yes. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, Joey, did you want to add anything more to the storm shelter?
That sometime until recently, I mean, we thought it was simple, but there's a little bit more complexity to it. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is why you reach out to your regional program specialist, because I mean, there's just different complexities that you really need to discuss, because and like I say, we're the first part of your team, because we don't want to steer you wrong. We want to make for sure everything's right, because it's hard to unring a bell once you do it. So we want to be on the early side to be able to help prevent any issues. So there you go.
Thank you. Great reminders. Thank you. So our fourth item was around cultural or language specialists. And it looks like we have 71% that selected quality as the cost category, and that is definitely true. And you're encouraged to spend quality dollars on cultural and language activities. We've also got it listed as non-direct, admin, direct services. It could, in some instances, if you have a tribally operated center, and that is considered a part of your overall operating costs associated with your center, that could conceivably be a part of your direct services. Definitely, need to consider how you're offering your direct services and what that looks like. It could potentially be admin, I suppose, again, it depends on what they're doing. And this is why it's so important to talk about that. But definitely quality, I think, because you have to meet that minimum quality expenditure amount, that's probably the best place to put it, but there's definitely other areas it could go to. Okay, and then we go to number 5. Fees at a private school. Oh, I love this. Look, unallowable under CCDF, 85% of people said unallowable. And because we had that slide, that means you were all looking at the restrictions on the use of CCDF funds slide, right? That said no tuition, right? We cannot use CCDF funds to essentially pay for anything that replaces what a child would have in their school day. And I think that's kind of my easy way of saying that. However, this is one of those areas that if you see the statement fees for a private school, perhaps the question needs to be, what are those fees for? Because perhaps that school has a before or after school care program. In which case, what would we consider those fees? Does anyone want to share? If it's a before and after school care program, what would those fees then be considered? You can feel free to put it in the chat. You could come off mute. It could be direct. You're absolutely right. It could be direct, or perhaps it's fees towards some type of quality activity that they're doing after school in the before and after school program. It could even be possibly quality if it's going towards activities for that after school time or that before school time. So I love this, love that we see a lot of direct. And again, this is a great example of saying, you know, what exactly is that expenditure, and having that communication and making sure we're very clear in our understanding of the expenditures and how we code them, right? So great. And our last one, what is the cost category for an administrative assistant's salary? And again, we've got 83% selecting admin cost, which again, on the surface of an administrative assistant, for sure, we would consider, look, it's in the title, right? Administrative assistant, assuming they're doing administrative activities. But let me throw this one at you. What if a part of their day is spent doing eligibility determination? They're meeting with families and determining eligibility or redetermining eligibility. Would that change what cost category that portion of their salary would come from? I see non-directs popping up. I see Alma, yes, it would change, right? Then you could look at a portion of their time being considered something different. Yes, non-direct is a great example because remember, eligibility determination and redetermination is considered a non-direct service for CCDF purposes. What if your administrative assistant also has an office within your childcare center and at times is asked to be in the classroom with children? Alyssa just wrote direct. So perhaps part of their salary is considered direct. And you know, we always say, what are those general cost principles? People go, oh, wait. Do we have to do a big complex time study? Does it have to be really intense? And we say, what is reasonable? When you consider what someone's duties are and the job and the work that they do, what is a reasonable estimation? And so we definitely recommend kind of a generalized time study so you have a clear picture of what their duties and responsibilities are. But their salary might not come out of just one cost category, depending on the types of things that they do. Perhaps they also are a language specialist. They could go in and that part of their salary could be considered quality. Lots of different things to think about when we think about people's roles and responsibility. And Alma just suggested in the chat that they have staff who allocate their time on their time card. That's a great way to do that. That's a great way to do that, to be able to track that for record keeping. Thank you, Alma, for sharing that. So those were kind of a little tricky, as Melissa said, a little tricky, but again, really is important to know what is the expenditure and to ask the question so it's coded correctly. I hope that was a helpful exercise. And with that, I believe I'm turning it to Sarah.
Thank you, Patty. So now we're going to take a step to kind of towards wrapping things up. And on our next slide, we're going to talk about building the bridges to strengthen this collaboration of all of the wonderful things that are happening in your program. So you've heard us talk for the last hour about all of the different partners, internal and external, that you interact with and that are there to help support you in your program. So as a CCDF program, you have many different stakeholders that help you design, deliver, and guide your program. In today's session, we have focused primarily on the fiscal aspects of managing your CCDF funds, but there's a whole world out there that we can look at building these bridges with all of these partners. As you work to engage the different stakeholders, we encourage you to pause and ask yourself, do we have the right people at the table? Those that you include for fiscal work may look different than those who you might include when you're talking about language and culture or the health and safety needs of your program. And be mindful of when to invite them and add them to the group so that it's timely for them and a good use of their time. Also, are we communicating effectively to identify and reach our shared goals? So you may find from meeting to meeting, the goals on the topic have changed. So the goals that you have for language and culture may look different than the goals that you have when discussing your budget allocations or those types of things. So ensuring that everybody has a clear understanding of what the goal of the meeting is and the purpose behind it. This may help you look to see if others have a more narrowly defined goal and you're looking at things more broadly, or are they just different altogether? And is everyone's needs being met? So we've invited Fiscal to the table, but did we hear from them what they needed from this meeting or the outcome that would help them be more effective in their roles as well? Do we have a shared understanding of these goals? Do we have competing goals? Are you being respectful of everyone's time? We all know that we wear a million different hats and have a lot of things to do, and one more meeting or webinar is not always top of our list of things. So being mindful of the time and the frequency and ensuring that it's effective for everybody involved. And lastly, we really want to look at the systems and structures you have in place for sharing information. How are these systems the same or different than what you've used before? Is it email? Is there an electronic system or database that you have? And if you have these systems, who has access to them so that everybody who needs information has the ability to access it and stay informed? Or possibly, is there a different structure you are considering or might be beneficial to put in place to ensure that this collaboration can be effective? So keep in mind that you have a variety of different stakeholders, both internally, like your leadership, your elders, your fiscal department, even HR, when we talk about the classification of different employees and how we're going to set up those cost allocations. To even your external partners, whether that's looking at architects and contract managers from a construction standpoint, or hopefully your regional office to be that supporter and cheerleader for you. With that, we're going to transition to our next slide as we wrap things up. And we're going to pause a moment to see if you guys have any questions about the information that we've covered today. As an important touch point, we do still have a next step, as Patty mentioned earlier, that after we wrap up questions and any content, we're going to transition to some breakout rooms for you to have opportunities to ask questions one-on-one that's based off of allocation size. So we're going to pause for a moment, answer any questions, and then we'll pass it over to Melissa for instructions on what to do next. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or questions in the chat box at this time. So Melissa, if you want to go ahead and give us instructions, we can pick up our questions in our breakout rooms.
Thank you so much. So we're going to go really quick to this resource page on the next slide, which is just some helpful resources that we have that we think might be helpful. As I could tell in the chat box, some of you were really great to add the slide decks from the National Tribal Conference and the links. So thank you so much for that. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this as I really want you all to go to the breakout rooms and have discussion. So we'll just go ahead and go to the next slide. Before we launch the breakout rooms here in this session, we want to let you know about this great opportunity that we have coming up. Sarah mentioned it a little bit, but we're going to have additional office hour opportunities. This will be a one-on-one session with the Office of Grants Management and Office of Child Care Specialist. To sign up, you can just scan this code here and it will take you to some of the to a smart sheet, and it will have some general information that you can share, and then someone will be in touch with you. So I'm just going to hold on this one for a second, and then we will make sure that we can also add a link in the chat box. But this QR code should be pretty easy. All right, we're going to go ahead and move to the next slide, which is about the breakout rooms. So again, this is an opportunity for you all to go into breakout rooms. As mentioned, they will be set up by tribal lead agencies with large allocations, medium allocations, and small allocations, which means when the breakout room launches at the bottom of your screen, you'll just pick which one you want to go into and it will take you right over there. And so I also want to say that this is, again, a great opportunity to get those very specific questions answered. And there will be 2 people in the room with you that can answer the questions that you have. So when you go into this room, you will not return back to this room. You'll end from there. So I'm going to turn it over. Again, these are launched at the bottom. You'll see a little tab at the bottom that says breakout rooms. All you have to do is run your cursor over it, and then you can self-select your room. Hannah and I will stay in this room Hannah will stay in this room. And if you can't go on your own, Hannah will move you. No worries there. But it will happen after the majority starts to move around. So again, you will go into these breakout rooms by what size allocation you are, and you will have somebody meet you in the room, and then you will go ahead and exit from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to close this out.
Thank you, Melissa. So I just want to say thank you for joining us today. And as a reminder, once you have done your participation in your breakout rooms, you will be able to leave the webinar from there. There's no need to return to this main room. And we look forward to seeing you at the next fiscal webinar on October 10th to discuss CCDF financial planning and budgeting. We'll see you in just a few seconds in your rooms.